Welcome, everyone. My name is Sandra Nagy, and I'm the Managing Director of Future Design School. I'm thrilled to be here today with my colleagues and amazing educators, Les Macbeth, Diane Rutherford, and Quinn Henderson. Our team has the distinct privilege of working in schools across North America, helping them to transform education and to increase vital future-ready skill development for students. I wanted to start by saying a huge thank you to all of you. This has not been an easy time. In our work, we have seen an unbelievable amount of dedication from educators right across the system. In the 20 years that I've been working in education, where I've been focused on leveraging technology to drive effective pedagogy, I have never seen a bigger transformation, and truly overnight. You have provided deep support to students every day, all while managing your own lives amidst challenging circumstances. Thank you for all you have done and continue to do as you plan for back to school with a constantly changing paradigm.
Hi, everyone. My name is Diane Rutherford, and I was an elementary school teacher having taught in the classroom for over 6 years. I am also a Google certified educator. I run professional development at Future Design School, and over the last number of months have had the absolute privilege to work with hundreds of Google K-12 trainers to reimagine remote learning and assessment while leveraging G Suite tools. If you're unfamiliar with Google's certification program, they are a great way to learn about how to implement Google tools in your teaching practice. And completing the exam is actually an excellent example of learning by doing.
Hey everyone, I am Les Macbeth, and I've been an educator for 10 years. At Future Design School, I'm the director of special projects, and in my classroom, I used a project-based, place-based learning model that leveraged technology to create personalized learning experiences for my students. In addition to being a Google certified educator like Diane, I'm also a Google certified innovator, and I've been facilitating the Innovator program as the design coach since 2016. The Innovator program is designed for educators who have big ideas for transforming education, and in my mind, it's the best way to build your professional learning network.
Hi, everyone. My name is Quinn Henderson. I was a middle school and high school teacher before joining Future Design School as an education lead. In addition to being a Google certified educator and innovator like Les, I'm also a Google certified trainer. The trainer program is a great way for tech integrators and coaches and others who want to support other educators in using Google tools.
During this 1 hour session, we're going to cover a lot at a rapid pace, but we're also making a planning document available, which we will introduce in a few moments. We hope it will be valuable for you to follow along with and take notes. For our agenda, we're going to start with some inspiration, move into the elements for exceptional inquiry-based learning, talk about making thinking visible through journey-based assessment, and then wrap up by considering what this all means for students. Throughout the session, we'll be taking guidance from our educators on how to leverage Google tools to infuse inquiry and manage assessment effectively. We'll demonstrate how these tools allow you to seamlessly go between different scenarios for learning, from in-person to hybrid to online. At the heart of this conversation is the idea that change is a constant in this new environment, and that while technology can support us on our path, really meaningful change is going to take much more than technology alone. The unique circumstances in which we are living call on us to reimagine education, really giving us the opportunity to engage students deeply through authentic inquiry. This is a chance for us to focus on supporting students to follow their passions and to drive learning where we focus more on questions and less on answers, more on the skills that we need to thrive and less on rote memorization. To start, I'm going to share a little bit more about the work we do at Future Design School and provide some inspiration for the session. At Future Design School, we're a team made up of educators, entrepreneurs, and designers who are all passionate about transforming education. Together, our ultimate goal is to empower teachers to develop future-ready students. When we think about what students need to be future-ready, we look at it holistically, taking into account students' social-emotional needs, as well as essential learning strategies, character traits, and competencies. Our ultimate goal is the conscious development of future-ready skills and competencies, which are highlighted in the outer purple ring. But we know that competency development can only happen if we also focus on well-being, fostering optimism, identity exploration, and a sense of psychological safety. This visual showcases a hierarchy of needs. We believe that working from the inside out by helping students to establish healthy minds, routines, and relationships, that they become ready for deep learning and knowledge exploration. We support schools and districts in various capacities through our strategic work, professional development, and student programming. We've continued to evolve our supports to meet schools where they're at in this remote and hybrid learning journey. As educators, we all know that this moment has called on us to change our practice and embrace a truly innovative mindset. It has not been easy, but we're so encouraged by what we've seen in schools and classrooms. This truly is an amazing opportunity to reimagine pedagogy and assessment practices. Let's get right into talking about inquiry learning, the elements that can make it exceptional for students, and how Google tools can help scaffold this type of learning journey for teachers and students. As promised, we wanted you to be able to follow along and take notes, and also to reflect on your own planning for the upcoming school year as we go through the rest of the discussion. To do this, we're sharing a planning tool with you, and we're going to drop a link to the planner in the chat. We hope that you'll take notes and use this in whatever way makes sense for you. In addition to the planner, there are also links to teacher examples inside of the tool. When you open up the planner, for each section we cover, you'll be able to take notes. You'll also have summaries that you can access inside of the planner. And then as you walk away from this conversation, we hope that you'll use the planner to plan some effective lessons for your students as you think about back to school. At Future Design School, we've worked with tens of thousands of educators over the last 5 years. And over just the last few months, we've supported thousands of educators, including Google trainers, to specifically support their online learning processes. In all cases, we've uncovered the elements that make for an exceptional learning experience, in whatever form learning takes, be that in person or online. We also have our own research-backed philosophy around exceptional learning, which we take into account when designing learning experiences. When we're talking about inquiry-based learning, our key elements of exceptional learning are fundamental in promoting meaningful engagement. While we'd love to cover each and every one of these today, the reality is that we only have 1 hour. So we're going to focus on 3 key elements and highlight how we might leverage various G Suite tools to amplify learning. We believe teachers are experienced designers and know that taking these elements into account while designing inquiry-based learning has proven to engage students deeply. The 3 elements we're going to focus on today are problem-driven learning, student choice and voice, and ongoing assessment. Let's begin by taking a closer look at problem-driven learning. Quinn, can I ask you to kick us off?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sandra. When we look at problem-driven learning refers to when the topic and guiding questions reflect authentic issues or challenges that concern or interest our students. This can come from a student's own interest or passions, or it can be chosen based on the content standards or curriculum expectations. Let's say you're a science teacher getting ready to teach biodiversity and are looking to create more problem-driven experiences. You might pose an overarching question like, how might we minimize human impact on biodiversity in a local ecosystem? Here, students can start asking the follow-up questions like, what is having the biggest impact? And what is biodiversity? Or how is it affecting our community? Consider another option where students choose based on their interest and passions. And we could pose a question like, how might we leverage technology to solve a real-world problem? Now, depending on the grade level of your students, you may need to do a little more support and scaffolding. Recently, I had the opportunity to do some problem-driven learning with some middle school students in one of our student programs. And they were identifying problems that were related to the food supply chain, time management, mental health, and access to PPE, just to name a few. And we want to share with you some additional examples of problem-driven learning. And these are created by teachers across all grades. And those can be found by using the link that we're sharing in the chat. I think a great example of problem-driven learning is one that we used in 7th grade mathematics. And we let our students know that the school wanted to plan a community garden. They had designated space, but still needed to determine how to divide the plot. We asked students to make a plan for the garden, taking into account how people would move about tending to the garden and the amount of planting area each person would be allotted. They would need to justify how much area they had designated per person and demonstrate examples of how much each person could plant of different types of vegetation. This exploration would necessitate the students to use fractions, do measurements, and thinking through ratios, all of which are aspects of the 7th grade curriculum. Diane, what does student choice and voice look like, especially with young students?
Thanks, Quinn, for sharing that example. It's a really great example of using an authentic problem to really inform deep inquiry. So in terms of student choice and voice, I always find that when I present a problem to students, the hook to get them interested is when they are given that choice and that voice. Presenting an overarching problem and then letting students pick the problem within that problem that speaks to them really empowers them to bring in their own personal experiences and expertise when creating solutions. They love being given the opportunity to choose the topics they wish to study and the form that their products take, as well as the steps they take in their learning journey. So I find that leveraging G Suite tools really provides students with ample options for how to demonstrate their learning. A question that I posed to my students that lent itself nicely to student choice and voice was, how might we reduce the impact of challenges due to weather? You can see that this inquiry was informed by the problem of weather, which we know has gotten more extreme with the rise of climate change. So to provide my students with choice and voice, I first started by unpacking the 5 W's, beginning, of course, with what. What are their interests within the context of this? How might we question? For this, we created a wonder wall to capture their wonderings over the course of the unit. Continuously capturing wonderings in a collaborative way is an impactful way for students to gain deeper insight into the different challenges associated with each problem. For example, what did they wonder about the health impacts of weather or the economic or social impacts? Some students chose to look at how weather impacts industries like farming, whereas others focused on flooding in more urban areas. I also considered where my students learn best and how I could integrate that choice into the learning experience. For example, if certain students learn best through experiences, you may want to consider how learning can be extended beyond the 4 walls of the classroom, something so important in this remote learning setting. A great way to do this was to virtually bring experts into the classroom. And student choice and voice offers ample opportunities for supporting students in becoming more autonomous learners by providing them greater flexibility in students' work schedules and timelines. With elementary students especially, it is important to effectively scaffold this process with students to ensure they are meeting their learning goals and are working to identify their own next steps. As students become more confident in directing their own learning, greater flexibility can be provided. And of course, we are always coming back to the why. Students are always wondering why they are learning what they are learning, which of course comes back to that problem-driven learning tenet of exceptional learning. And as educators, we also want to ensure that we have a clear idea of the why behind the tasks we are having students complete, ensuring that learning is always being driven through authentic tasks. And finally, I wanted to address the how, by giving students choice in how they wanted to showcase their learning and progress over time, and with whom. Was it through the building of a prototype, the design of a service, or through a performance-based task? Who did they want to present their learning to? Was it their peers, real users, or who else might they consider? So driving inquiry with these key questions in mind will help provide autonomy through choice and voice to students of all ages.
That's a great example, Diane, and thanks, Quinn, for your example as well. I was hoping that we could now hear an example for problem-driven learning that takes into account student choice and voice through this next video.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Hunt, and I'm a Dean of Students at a middle school in Palm Beach County, Florida. And I want to share with you an amazing opportunity to engage in problem-based learning with your students. So with my students, I allow them an opportunity to kind of start to flex their muscles and start to investigate something that they were passionate about. And I find that the platform Google Sheets is a perfect marriage with research and data collection, and then keeping the students engaged and highly excited. So as an unsung hero app within Google, the thing that's really awesome about it is the students are looking at culling information from credible sources, but I also like to give my students an opportunity to work with their peers, use the collaborative tools that are built into that process, and start to actually create their own surveys. So for example, as my students are looking at their futures, looking at their careers 5-10 years from now, some of them expressed that they were interested in going into the medical sciences. So they conceived of things like investigating concussions in the NFL, while others were more interested in activism work and political science, and they wanted to investigate the rights of marginalized people, including the LGBTQI population. So with those projects, they start with a hypothesis, and then they start to build out questions as they relate to the hypothesis. So as they look at that quantitative data, they'll start creating scales. For example, ranking certain factors, and then in Google Sheets, they can build out really wonderful charts that can graphically display those answers. As a teacher, I can use all of the different features that Google has to offer in that platform, including being able to provide comments to kind of guide their learning through that problem-based learning process, and kind of can give them an opportunity to kind of think in ways that they can investigate further. Perhaps they need additional questions as they're looking at some of those samples and those questions. And then of course, opportunities for them to get feedback from their peers. So as we're going through the process, their peers have an opportunity to look at that research and to provide some guidance as well. So Google's is amazing, amazing product as a whole, but I hope that more people take a look at Sheets, because the transferable skills they'll get from that process can carry them into further work as a student, but then of course into the world of work. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Natasha Rachel, and I'm a digital learning specialist joining you all the way from Atlanta, Georgia. I leverage Google tools for problem-driven instruction, and the tool that I especially love for doing this is Google's Applied Digital Skills. I'm going to share my screen and share with you a little bit about why I absolutely love Applied Digital Skills for this purpose. First, as a teacher, you have tons of lessons that you're able to scroll through, no matter what curriculum you teach, that are ready to go to share with your students, either through Google Classroom or by simply inviting them to their class here in Applied Digital Skills. You can also share a link with them as well. But there are tons and tons of lessons ready to go no matter what curriculum you teach. All you have to do is add them to your class or your Google Classroom. And what I love about this is that from a student perspective, they will then see all of the lessons that you have added to their class that you want them to work on. This is great because it does not put you in a position as a teacher to teach how to use Google's tools. This curriculum does that, and the students learn how to use the Google tools by solving these problems and creating these projects. So here's a few that I want to highlight for problem-driven learning. The first is writing an if-then adventure story. How great would it be for your students to take a problem that exists and to write an if-then adventure? If this happens, then what? Also creating a presentation all about a topic, or planning a community service project, taking a real-world problem that exists in their community and turning it into a community service project. And at the same time, learning how to use the Google tools, building a budget in Google Sheets, understanding their digital footprint, which we know is so important right now, designing a website to promote a project. As you can see, these are just a few examples. I know that once you dive in, you will absolutely love Google's Applied Digital Skills for problem-driven learning. Take care, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.
Those examples were all great. They lead me to a question though, Diane and Quinn. I really was hoping that you could share in what ways you leverage G Suite tools to create these problem-driven learning opportunities where you were clearly offering elements of choice and voice. It would be great to hear how the tools came into play. Quinn, do you want to kick us off?
Oh, yeah, you bet. Thanks, Sandra. When focusing on problem driven learning in the math example, we had students first sketch out their garden layouts using Google Drawings. And students shared their initial thinking around translating the measurements of the real world garden to the online representation. We then took the time to give students feedback through the comment feature and to ask those next level questions. And for this particular student of what you see on the screen, the questions were around thinking about the space that different vegetables might need to grow, as well as thinking about how the gardeners might need to move about in order to tend to the plants. Then students were able to take that feedback and then iterate on their designs and ultimately leverage Google Slides to demonstrate their specific measurements and their thinking with the class. So through this problem-driven inquiry experience, students developed and applied tangible skills in the math curriculum, and that included a variety of measurements, arithmetic, fractions, and ratios.
That's a great example. Diane, I would love to hear how you've used Google tools.
For sure. So for me, one of the most impactful ways to provide student choice and voice was through the use of HyperDocs created through Google Docs. So with HyperDocs, I was able to use a variety of resources such as videos and websites to engage my students around certain topics. So if we were looking at that topic of weather, students could engage with a number of resources that focus on the different problems associated with extreme weather, including increased flooding or forest fires. And then they were able to choose the topic or the problem they were most interested in learning more about. HyperDocs allowed me to set up the inquiry process in a meaningful way where students could ask questions, conduct research, interpret their findings, report back, and constantly reflect on what they have learned, allowing them to bring in their own personal experiences as well. HyperDocs, even though I would design them on Google Docs, allowed me to embed a number of other G Suite tools as well to engage students in a highly personalized way throughout the process.
Wow. In all of your examples, I hear a real emphasis on the learning journey or the process, and really less on the end product. I also know that lots of educators are grappling with how to assess the learning journey in this moment. While moving to online learning has been a real struggle, it also presents us with this unique opportunity to leverage technology tools to make learning more visible and to document that process or that learning journey. Les, I know you were such an early adopter of Google tools and leveraging them with students in both the in-person and the online environment. I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic.
Sure thing. Maybe I'll start by explaining what journey-based assessment is. So journey-based assessment is a process that was coined by Future Design School, which values the learning process over the product. And when states and districts had to cancel standardized testing due to COVID, I think this was actually a huge opportunity for educators, for us to reimagine moving away from content-driven rote memorization testing towards a more holistic, authentic approach to assessment. In a world where pen and paper or even digital tests are impossible to administer with fidelity due to lack of supervision, what is the goal of assessment? I think that this is an opportunity to use assessment as a tool to see our students' growth over time, for them to see themselves on a continuum of learning, and for them to spark deeper inquiry questions and deeper learning. So when we think about journey-based assessment, it's another one of these elements of exceptional learning that we've created at Future Design School. So traditionally, assessment has been used as an indicator of what students know at a specific moment in time, usually after the learning has been completed. Educators often also implement formative assessment, allowing students to get ongoing feedback as their learning journey progresses. But journey-based assessment takes that one step further by adding in an important component of reflection that provides students with agency. So journey-based assessment encompasses both formative and summative assessment, as well as students reflecting on their learning, setting their own goals and next steps, and working in partnership with their teacher to identify gaps in understanding and opportunities for deeper learning. Journey-based assessment is facilitated by several factors, whether it's done online or in person. And those factors are gathering multiple forms of evidence, being present for our students, whether it's in person or online, having frequent check-ins with which remote learning could actually be easier to facilitate using Google Meet, and regular feedback cycles. Now, given that we're focusing on G Suite today, I'm going to talk a little bit more about gathering multiple forms of evidence. So typically when we think of assessment, we immediately jump to products. We think of the things that students are creating that show their learning. However, not all students communicate their learning best in one format or at one specific moment. Journey-based assessment shifts the focus from products to the process by gathering evidence in multiple forms, including conversations and observations. The collection of this evidence happens throughout the entire learning journey, not just at the end, and it includes both summative and formative assessment, as well as that key component of student reflection and goal setting. To bring this to life a little bit, I'll share an example of what this looked like in my classroom. So I was teaching a course on environmental design, and at the beginning of our unit, our students completed a conversation-based assessment as a follow-up to a field trip. So we were learning about sustainable urban design, and students were asked to take 360 photos that represented the viewpoints of various architects and urban planners that we've been studying. They used the Google Street View app to take these 360 photos. Then, when we got back to school, I used a 360 viewer, such as a Google Cardboard, to view these photos, while they verbally explained to me why they selected each image and why they selected that location and how it represented their chosen architect. I then used a Google form to give them feedback on the conversation that we had, as I was able to ask them questions about why they had chosen this image. And all of this information went into a Unit 1 feedback document. This activity could also be done remotely really easily by having students go out and capture their own images, sharing them with me, and then we could do our conversation-based assessment using Google Meet. Next, my students participated in an observation-based assessment. This is also a great opportunity for transforming in-person assessments to virtual assessments. So in the past, the assignment was that my students had to give a presentation about high-performance landscape guidelines in front of the entire class. However, in moving the assessment online, I had students complete this activity using a recorded Google Meet. My students met in small groups and conducted their presentations virtually. They were also graded on their follow-up questions that they asked their peers during the meet. I was able to observe the recorded conversations and provide feedback on their content knowledge, as well as their thinking and their questioning and their application of their learning. The feedback all went into their Unit 1 feedback document. And after this assignment, I actually surveyed my students and found that most of them preferred doing their presentation online as opposed to in front of the class because they felt more comfortable this way than they did standing in front of their group of peers. Finally, there's the products. In this project, my students created many products throughout the entire learning process, such as a site plan for a real-life landscape design competition that they entered, as well as a scale model of their site that applied these principles of high-performance landscape design. Throughout the journey, I provided all their feedback in this single document so they could easily look back and see their growth and progress. In addition, throughout the unit, the students also took quizzes on content, did daily exit tickets, we watched videos, and they completed activities and flipped lessons where they had a choice in a sort of choose your own adventure format. And all of these activities went into this main feedback document. Then I was able to comment on their answers and have them respond to my comments, creating an ongoing dialogue within this document. Students were also reflecting on their own next steps and giving each other feedback along their multiple iterations of their site plans. This helped them to push their ideas forward while deepening their understanding of the principles of high-performance landscape design. And they could also easily be taken online if we were to go to a virtual format with students doing their critiques over Google Meet or through comments in Google Docs.
Wow, Les, that was such an incredible project. You have an amazing handle on the Google tools. I wanted to ask you if there was one tool that you would suggest for somebody who's just looking to try something new in assessment.
Yeah, that's a great question. And for me, I feel like the tool that's really having its moment right now is Jamboard. So one thing that I was always very adamant about in my classroom was helping students to value the process of learning, not just the final product. And when we were teaching in person, this meant a lot of sticky notes and tons of quick sketches on paper. So now, in an age of remote or hybrid or blended learning, my go-to tool for ongoing assessment would definitely be Jamboard. If you're not familiar with Jamboard and you miss your classroom whiteboard, you should definitely check it out. It's part of G Suite's core services, so it's easy for every teacher to start using right away. Jamboard is a collaborative whiteboard. Like other Google products, multiple people can edit at the same time. You can use sticky notes, you can draw, you can write, you can annotate things from Google Drive or from the web. And it's great for students to collaborate on cooperative learning or for teachers to illustrate concepts to students. Google Meet is built right in, and it's perfect for showing the thinking process, which is such an important part of ongoing assessment. If you're new to Jamboard and you want some ideas for how you can use it with your students, check out the resources that we created with Google, which are on Workbench, which we'll share the link here in the chat. It includes 16 lessons that you can use with middle or high school students to build creativity, communication, collaboration, and critical thinking, either online or in person.
Thanks, Les. That's a great example and one that I hope a lot of educators take advantage of. I would like to also take this moment to hear another example of ongoing assessment that leverages Google tools. Let's cut to a video.
Hello, everyone. My name is Wally Briggs V, and I'm a tech integration consultant and the executive director of instructional technology for Einstein Charter Schools here in Louisiana. App smashing is a way to combine two or more applications in order to solve a problem or to engage students. Google Classroom, Meet, and Jamboard can be app smashed together to address ongoing and authentic assessment with students. Teachers can assign their students a Jamboard through Google Classroom, then fire up a Google Meet and share their screen. They can even record their lessons in order to provide additional support and interventions. Students can have their own page in Jamboard so that they can show their work if they make a copy for each student in Google Classroom. So everyone has their own collection of activities. During synchronous instruction, students can share their screen to provide explanations to the class, similar to the way that students will go up to the board and explain their answers in a traditional classroom. I've even worked with coaches to use Meet and Jamboard to engage with their players virtually. We've created grid guides with Meet and Jamboard to form digital playbooks for their players so that coaches can use their face-to-face time to focus more on strength and conditioning and other position-specific drills. There's a wide variety of uses for Meet and Jamboard. These are just a few that I've used, but I'm sure you can develop even more. I can't wait to see what you create.
What a great way to showcase learning and really make the learning process visible. The thing that strikes me about all of these stories is the constant reflection on student needs. It's always been vital to meet students where they're at and understand what will engage them and help them to deeply connect to their learning. But now, more than ever, in an online or hybrid environment, needs are changing, and different students who have thrived in person might struggle online and vice versa. To pull all of this amazing information together, I thought we could consider the personas of two students, one who's thriving online and anxious about going back to school, and one who's totally disengaged. At Future Design School, we use personas as representations of groups of people who we're working to support. These personas that we're about to share are fictional representations, but are based on real interviews with real students. As we talk about each student, I challenge you to think about the students in your own classes and what their needs might be. As a reminder, we wanted you to be able to follow along and take notes throughout the session. When you open up your planner, and we'll drop a link back into the chat, you will see that there's a persona slide inside of the planner. It looks like this. As we talk about student needs, we challenge you again to think about the students in your classes or the ones that you anticipate having in your classes for back to school and their unique needs. Think about what your students are saying, doing, thinking, and feeling relative to online or hybrid learning. To start considering different student needs, let's meet Soraya. Soraya is a middle schooler who is thriving online. She's been freed from social pressure that she was feeling at school and is no longer distracted by trying to fit in. She's found that in this new online environment, she can focus on her learning. She was experiencing anxiety in school prior to COVID, and despite this pandemic, her anxiety has actually decreased. She says things like, I feel better in the online classroom. I'm nervous about going back. I want to stay online in school forever. Learning is better online because I get to work on more projects. Soraya's nerves today stem from having to face the social pressures again if school reopens, and also because she's worried about getting sick. Contrast that with Jaden, who's struggling with online learning because he faces distractions at home. He prefers video games to online learning and often has a poor Wi-Fi connection. His parents are busy working at home and they can't help him with his hard homework, which often leaves him very confused. When his Wi-Fi connection's good, he stays up all night playing Fortnite, and when it's time for school, he feels tired and unable to focus. Jaden is used to having lots of extracurricular activities and he feels bored at home. Video games provide him with the much-needed social interaction that he's craving. He's also sick of staring at a screen, so he's decided to opt out of school until things go back to normal. He says things like, online learning isn't real school. I want to see my friends. My teachers are not helping me enough. Jaden has felt best when his teachers have connected synchronously with his class and when he's been given opportunities to work in small groups collaboratively online. Let's also listen in on a video from Matt, who talks about getting to know his students leveraging Google tools. He's sick.
Hi, my name is Matt Winters and I'm an ELA teacher from Northern Utah. During the soft closure, one of the most invaluable tools for me was Google Classroom. Every day I would jump on and use Google Classroom all the way through, but the biggest tool within Google Classroom was my ability to ask a question quickly and easily to my students. So every day before students would even join the class, I prepared a set of questions. So sometimes they're grammar based, so like for instance I made like, here's a sentence, tell me what's wrong with it, here's some options for the question, so ABC, multiple choice. Other times it was opinions about novels and things that we were learning about that way, and kind of getting into the rigmarole of understanding whether or not they were getting the content that I'm trying to teach. But on the flip side, once in a while, at least once a week, I would ask a kind of an SEL or get to know you question. So, hey kids, how you feeling? Like, what's going on with you? And it would be a conversation that one-on-one we could have through that question, and all the other students wouldn't be able to see it. I could open it up for them if we wanted to, but most of the time I kept that private so I could check on my students. Sometimes it was just kind of get to know you stuff. So like, what's your favorite TV show right now? What's your favorite song? What's your song of the spring? So that I could get them into, okay, this is stuff that we do in class anyways, having some fun, but then it would lead to things later down the line. And so as a teacher during the soft closure, it was so helpful for me to have that Google Classroom question feature day in, day out. So thank you so much.
It's so vitally important in this online environment to deeply get to know your students. Putting together personas for our own students and thinking about their needs brings us to the question of, so what? Now what? We know that the start of any new school year begins with community building and fostering relationships with our students. What's different this year is that this will now take place in a hybrid setting or fully online, where we need to consider how to build meaningful student-to-teacher or peer-to-peer relationships, even in the potential absence of a fully in-person classroom. Understanding who our students are as individuals and as learners, and knowing what their motivations, strengths, and areas of growth are, allow us as educators to better design meaningful and impactful learning experiences, ones that empower students to leverage personal choice and voice when engaging in deep inquiry that's driven by real problems. I would love to turn it over to the educators on the call to really talk about your go-to Google relationship building tools. And for all of you listening in, it would be great if you could drop your best tools and uses of them to build relationships into the chat. Diane, I was hoping you could kick us off and talk about the youngest learners and how you build relationships with them online.
Absolutely. So as I think about our youngest learners and how to navigate this world of hybrid learning, I again always come back to this idea of relationship building. And we want to consider the parameters you want to set with your students to really foster community, not only at the beginning of the school year, but all the way throughout. So for this, Google Classroom was my go-to tool. And as we navigate this remote and hybrid learning model, Classroom plays an even more vital role. Not only does it ensure that student work, announcements, class meetings through Meet integration and assessment are consolidated in one place, it also provides a single resource hub for parents to access as they are supporting their children in an at-home and hybrid learning environment. Quinn, do you have any ideas to share about the middle school?
You bet. Thanks, Diane. For middle school, I find it really important to set up a whole class and small group regular meetings and check ins through Google Meet. And this really allowed me to keep my finger on the pulse of my students' needs so that I could better design the learning for them. And starting the week off as a whole class was really a great way to build community and to foster those peer to peer relationships. And that was especially helpful with the things like peer feedback. And it really allowed students to see one another as playing a valuable role in each other's learning. And so I really loved having Google Meet on a regular basis. What about you, Les?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind for me from a high school perspective was something that I did every year at the beginning of the year with my students, where I had them set up a personal portfolio using Google Sites. This was a great place for them to share more about themselves, about their interest, and most importantly, their goals for the year. And then over the course of the school year, they would continue to add pieces to their portfolio, reflect on their learning, create next steps for moving forward. And it gave both them and me as the teacher a better insight into their progress and their growth. And with all of this consolidated in one place on a Google site, I was also able to continuously reflect on that question of what are my students' unmet needs and how am I helping them to be challenged and to go deeper in their learning.
Those are really, really great tools and really great examples. And I'm going to challenge everyone on the call to continue to put their great examples into the chat so that we can be sharing with each other. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And in closing, there's a few things that I want to make sure we cover off. We really hope that you can take away some ideas to leverage with your students as you move back into school, in whatever format that might take in your region. We hope that you've been able to take inspiration for cultivating learning experiences that are problem-driven, give students choice and voice, and make learning visible through journey-based assessment, really focusing the whole time on real student needs. We know that the continuity of learning will mean moving between in-person, online, and hybrid modes, and we hope that you will use Google tools to ensure a seamless transition between the different modes. This is a learning journey for everyone. And at Future Design School, we're here to support your needs through strategic support, professional development, and hybrid student programs. The next school year is going to look different for everyone. And while we can't predict what it will look like exactly, we also wanted to make sure that you know Google for Education provides a suite of resources to meet educators wherever they may be on their journey with technology. They offer training and certification programs for educators of all levels, schedules, and classroom situations. Let's talk a little bit about these resources. The first is learning to use Google tools. If you're only going to take down one link, make it this one, and we'll drop it into the chat. In the Teacher Center, you'll find guides that will help you get started with tools like assignments, classroom, and Meet. And also full training courses like a popular new distance learning unit that covers topics such as instructional design for distance learning and extend your reach with Google Meet. In addition to the Teacher Center, the Google for Education team created Teach from Anywhere to provide teachers and families who are new to Google tools with access to free training and resources that they need to help students keep learning, whether in a classroom or at home. The second is developing product expertise. Educators who want to go above and beyond completing single trainings should check out the 2 certified educator exams, Level 1 and Level 2. They provide the opportunity to show personal expertise and mastery of Google products and tools. Many of the educators on today's call have proudly earned Level 1 and Level 2 certifications. And finally, educate and inspire others. There are 3 different certification programs for educators who want to build upon their own mastery and share their expertise with others. In this ever-changing environment, we know that peer-to-peer support is more important now than ever. All three of these programs help educators share their passion for Google tools and transformative use of technology with their school communities. The three programs are the Certified Trainer Program, which enables educators to deliver group professional development around Google products and tools. The Certified Coach Program is a new program that helps instructional coaches hone their practice and work one-on-one with educators to use technology impactfully. The Certified Innovator Program invites educators to design and implement innovation solutions to education challenges. You can learn more about all of these programs and more in the Google for Education Teacher Center. Thank you again to all of you for being with us today. Our parting wish is that you all stay safe, healthy, and inspired to keep students learning in whatever format that might take for back to school. Thanks for being with us today.